When I got out of the army, I moved into a new apartment. It was a poorer area, but a quiet neighborhood of mostly older folks. My next door neighbor was an elderly woman. She had to be in her late 70s, maybe older. Frail, slow-moving, but always smiling and super nice. I met her the first week I moved in, when I was unloading groceries from my car. She was struggling to carry a paper bag up her steps, so I offered to help. She thanked me like a dozen times and offered to pay me. I declined, but from then on, she'd always stop to chat when she saw me. Over time, I started helping her with little things, bringing in her mail, carrying heavy groceries, shoveling her walkway when it snowed. She'd mention her son sometimes, but always in passing and always vague. At first, I assumed he lived far away, maybe out of state, but the more we talked, the more I realized this wasn't the case. One time, she let it slip that he lived with her. He was just very busy, and that's why I hadn't met him yet. This seemed odd. The house was small, and I had never seen anyone coming or going besides her. No extra car in the driveway, no signs of another person living there. When I asked what he did for work, she got quiet and changed the subject. Then, one afternoon, I found her sitting on her front steps, crying. I asked her what was wrong, and she shook her head, saying it was nothing and that she was just tired. I pressed gently, and after a long pause, she told me that she was afraid of her son. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me like she immediately regretted telling me. I asked if she was okay, if she needed help, if I should call someone. She wiped her eyes, forced a smile, and told me everything was fine. That was the end of the conversation. I didn't push, but it pissed me off and I started paying more attention. The next few days, I barely saw her. Her blinds were always shut. I even stopped by to bring in the mail, but when I knocked, she either didn't answer or said she wasn't feeling well and asked me to just leave it on the porch. Then, one night, I noticed something strange. I stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. Her living room window was slightly open, blinds parted just enough to see inside. I wasn't trying to pry, but I caught a glimpse of movement, someone walking past the window just for a second. It was quick, but I could have sworn I saw an elderly woman in a bathrobe, only it didn't look quite right. The way they moved, the shape of their shoulders, it didn't match hers. I stared for a moment. Then the figure turned back toward the window and I saw them more clearly. It wasn't her. It was a man, wearing a wig and her bathrobe. I froze, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Before I could react, the figure disappeared deeper into the house. I walked up to her door and knocked. Nobody answered. I knocked again, harder this time. After a long pause, the door opened slightly. A man stood there in the dim light, mid-40s, unshaven, and haggard. He looked nothing like the figure I'd just seen, but something felt off. His posture was tense, like he was hiding something behind the door. In this flat, dismissive way, he asked me if I needed something. I tried to sound casual and told him that I was just checking in on my neighbor because I hadn't seen her in a few days. He then told me she was sleeping. I asked if he was her son and if she was okay. He said yes and told me she was fine. I glanced past him. Something pink was balled up on the floor behind him. The bathrobe. The same one I had seen through the window. Then I heard something. A faint, muffled noise from inside the house, like a whimper. He started to tell me to have a good night and close the door, but before he could finish, the sound came again. It was my neighbor, and she was calling out for help. This basically threw me into a blind rage. I shoved the door open. He tried to block me, but I pushed past him. The house was dim, the air thick with a foul, stale smell. I rushed down the hall toward the sound, turned the corner, and saw her. She was sitting on a wooden chair in the middle of a bedroom. Her Her hands were tied to the armrests. Her long, gray hair had been sloppily cut short. Her lips were smeared with red lipstick and her cheeks caked with powder. She was dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, clothes that were far too big for her. She had been dressed up like a man. At the same moment I was processing all of this, from the side, her son lunged at me and tried to tackle me, but I was able to spin out of it. He was wearing her robe again and a fucking wig. He tried grabbing at me, and I guess he must have had long fingernails or something because he actually got a couple good scratches on me. I laid into him a couple times before I was able to get out of the house and call 911. The police arrived fast. They dragged him out, kicking and sobbing. She was taken to the hospital. I later learned she'd been abused for years, mentally and physically. I guess the guy had serious issues, but she cared too much about him to put him away somewhere, or she couldn't afford it, I don't know. The things he did to her, the way he controlled her, it was beyond anything I thought was actually real life. The dressing up, the role reversals, it was part of some twisted psychological torment he inflicted on her. She survived and was moved to a care facility somewhere safe, while her son was charged with a list of offenses. Last I heard, he was ruled mentally unfit to stand trial. I used to visit her, but I think it started to bring back a lot of bad memories for her, so I stopped going. I still think of her a lot. The way she smiled, how she always thanked me for the smallest kindness, and I wonder how many times she wanted to tell me the truth. I just wish I had noticed sooner. Maybe she wouldn't have spent all those years living in fear of her own son. About 8 years ago, I moved into a new house. I had taken a job in a different state and ended up with something a little more rural than I was used to. It was a pretty modest place, set back from the road, pretty, isolated, with empty fields and tree lines surrounding it. The quiet was pretty jarring at first, but I told myself I'd get used to it. My nearest neighbor, who I hadn't met yet, was a mile down the road, a fact that both felt peaceful and unsettling. 3 days after I moved in, there was a knock at the door just as the sun was going down. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened up, a man stood there, mid-50s, a bit weathered, but with a friendly smile. He introduced himself, said he lived down the road, and just wanted to welcome me to the area. We made small talk for a few minutes. He asked what brought me out here and told me a little bit about the town. He was polite, but I couldn't help notice there was something odd about him. Something about the way that he watched me, like he was trying too hard to seem normal. It was just weird. I chalked it up to my own nerves, made an excuse about needing to unpack, and sent him on his way. Early the next evening, around the same time, I opened the door to go outside and retrieve something from my car. I hadn't taken more than one step onto the porch when I saw someone walking up my driveway. It was my neighbor again, holding a pie this time. He was dressed in the exact same outfit as the day before and looked like he hadn't showered. I don't say this to make it sound like I was judging him for it, but I couldn't help but notice it. At the same time, it's not like you really need to impress anybody out here, so I just kind of brushed it off. He got to the edge of the porch and told me he had made a pie, holding it up. I didn't really know what to say. I couldn't have this guy just showing up to my house unannounced all the time, but I didn't want to be rude. I thanked him and offered for him to come in and share the pie with me, feeling like I didn't have much of a choice. We sat in my barely furnished kitchen, eating pie off paper plates. The pie was good, but totally cold, which was a little confusing because he made it seem like he had brought it right over. The conversation was a little stiff, mostly driven by him. His questions all felt strangely personal. Did I live alone? Did my family visit often? Did I lock my doors at night? Then he started to go on and on about his own family, and how his house was just like mine and how he loved what I had done with the place. This was particularly weird because I hadn't done anything with the place. I'd barely moved in. This is when it started to feel uncomfortable. I was trying to figure out an excuse to cut things short when he got up to use the bathroom. As he closed the bathroom door, I noticed something. A small sticker on the bottom of the pie tin. I lifted the plate and felt my stomach drop. There was a label on it from the grocery store in town. He hadn't made it. I wasn't sure why this set me off, but it did. When he came back, I tried to make a joke out of it. I told him that he made the pie so well, it looked like the grocery store wanted to hire him in the bakery department. And I held up the pie tin, revealing the label. I meant this to be lighthearted, but his face went blank, completely blank. I was about to tell him I was just teasing him when he looked me dead in the eye and said that I was the rudest guest he'd ever had over for dessert and that I wouldn't be invited back. I had no idea what was going on. I thought maybe he was joking in response to my joke, so I laughed. Then he started laughing. A sharp, high-pitched laugh that didn't sound right coming out of a grown man. He clutched his stomach and bent over like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Then, without warning, he let out this weird, sharp scream. It sounded like an animal, like a deer or something. Before I could react, he bolted past me, knocking over his chair and the little folding table we'd been sitting at. He ran down the hall and up the stairs deeper into my house. I could hear him stomping around on the second floor, opening and slamming doors, calling out names and telling people that weren't there to come out from wherever they were hiding. I backed out of the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and ran outside. I called the police from my driveway, keeping my eyes locked on the house. I half expected to see him burst through a window or come charging out the front door, but the house was silent now. It took the cops like a full 15 minutes to get there. The 2 deputies went inside while another one stayed with me. I told them what had happened, feeling ridiculous as I described how a lie about a pie had sent the guy into a frenzy. After a few minutes, one of the deputies came back outside, his face unreadable. He confirmed with me that I had said this man was my neighbor and lived down the road. I told him yes. He exchanged a look with his partner and then told me that this man hadn't lived anywhere near here for years. They led me inside. The guy was in the upstairs bedroom, lying on the floor, curled on his side like he was sleeping. He was mumbling something and rocking slightly. They cuffed him and let him out without a struggle. I asked them what the hell was going on. One of the deputies sighed and looked around the room. She explained that they knew who he was, that this was the house he used to live in, that his wife and kids left him and he couldn't keep up with the mortgage, and that everything sort of fell apart for him. He had ended up homeless, living in a shelter. I felt terrible and horrified at the same time. They explained that he had mental health issues and clearly couldn't let go. What they couldn't explain is how he had gotten out here from town without a vehicle. He must have walked all that way, carrying the pie. Additionally, they said that there had been calls to this address from the previous homeowner about suspected break-ins and that they now believed it was possible he was responsible. The guy didn't fight back when they put him in the squad car. He just sat there, staring at the house like he was trying to memorize every inch of it. I watched as they all drove away. I never found out what happened to him after that. Maybe they took him to a hospital, maybe he had family somewhere, but I never saw him again. That night, I locked every door and every window. I closed all the blinds and turned on every light. Then I just sat in the living room, wide awake, listening to the silence, wondering how many nights that guy had stood outside, looking in, waiting to come back home. The story I'm about to tell took place in a neighborhood I'd been living in for a while. It was a sparse little group of houses at the edge of town, just woods behind me. I liked the quiet. I liked knowing I was left alone. There had never been any issues. Then out of nowhere, things started feeling off. I'd come home from work and the back gate would be unlatched, or there'd be this faint cigarette smell lingering near the fence. I had one of those old floodlights with a motion sensor, bright enough to cut across the lawn and into the tree line. It started going off at random times at night. I'd be sitting in my living room, and suddenly the yard would light up like a prison break. The first couple times, I ignored it, figuring it was maybe an animal or something. But then it started happening every night. I tried cleaning and adjusting the sensor, thinking that something might be malfunctioning, but there was no change. Sometimes it would flick on and off, like something was pacing just out of proximity. Other times, it would stay on for long stretches, like something or someone might be out there, standing, just watching the house. It started to feel like someone was testing the boundaries, probing the sensor to understand its behavior and exactly how far away they needed to be in order to remain undetected. One night, I stayed up with the lights off, watching. At some point after midnight, the floodlight snapped on. I had had enough. I grabbed my flashlight and ran out the back door, standing on the back porch and beaming it into the tree line. There was a figure standing there. I couldn't make out much, just that it was a person. I didn't know what to say, so I just yelled out that they needed to leave. There was a long, awkward silence, then the figure just turned around and walked deeper into the woods and out of sight. I was deeply unsettled. I went back inside, locked the door, and just sat there thinking. The rest of the night was uneventful, but I know now I should have called the police. The next several nights went by without incident. But then one night, as I was laying in bed unable to fall asleep, maybe 4 or 5 days after the encounter, the floodlight snapped on. I sat up in bed, but before I could make a decision to get up and go back outside, there was a smashing sound from the side of the house, and the floodlight went out. A few seconds of silence passed. Then, from the back of the house, a deep scraping sound. It was the sound of metal on wood, slow and deliberate. Then a thud, then another. Someone was trying to pry open my back door. My body moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the front door for the car. As soon as I hit the driveway, I heard it. Footsteps breaking into a run behind me around the side of the house. I jumped in, slammed the door, locked it, and got out of there, throwing up gravel as I peeled out. In the rearview mirror, I could see flashlights moving through the first floor of my house. I parked in a store lot and called the cops, who got there as quick as they could. The house was empty. The back door frame was destroyed and splintered, like someone had forced it open with a pry bar. A few feet away, they found footprints in the dirt, at least 2 different sets. Inside, things were even weirder. The drawers in my bedroom were pulled out and dumped on the floor. The attic hatch was hanging open with the ladder extended down. The cops did a sweep but otherwise found nothing. Whoever it was gone. But here's the part that still gets me. Behind one of the bookshelves in my office, there was a hidden compartment. I had no idea it was there. It was left open and empty. I don't know what was in there or who could have possibly known it was there. I'd been living in that house for probably 3 years at that point and had no idea it was there. The only other info the police had was that the previous owner was some old guy who died in a nursing home. No family, no record of anything valuable being left behind. So what the hell were they looking for? And worse, did they find it? I stayed with a friend that night, too shaken to go back. I lived there for another year after that and nothing weird happened again. But every night I slept with my bedroom door locked and a bat within reach. I still don't know what was hidden in that house. and I sure as hell don't want to know what would have happened if I'd been inside when they found it.